The ferry approaches the island as afternoon light softens into gold. The white buildings of the village cascade down the cliff face, each one catching the sun, creating a geometry of light and shadow that seems too perfect to be accidental. Standing at the rail of the ferry, feeling the salt spray on the face, watching the harbor grow larger as the vessel slows. Other passengers crowd the deck, pointing cameras at the approaching spectacle, but there is room enough for everyone and more. The engine note changes, deepening as the ferry reverses to dock. The harbor wall is lined with fishing boats, their paint unfaded to soft blues and greens. Behind them, the buildings rise in terraces, connected by winding paths that seem to lead everywhere and nowhere. Disembarking into the warmth of the afternoon. The air is different here, lighter, scented with salt and wild herbs and something indefinably Mediterranean. The harbor is busy but unhurried. No one rushes in Greece, especially in the afternoon, especially on an island. Finding the path to the hotel, which climbs through narrow streets too narrow for cars. The luggage is carried by a donkey, led by a weathered man who knows every step of this climb and has known it for decades. The transaction is wordless, conducted through gesture and smile. The hotel is small, family-run, perched at the edge of the village where the buildings give way to bare rock and sea. The room faces west, toward the caldera, toward the spot where the sun will set in a few hours. The view from the balcony stops breath and thought. The sea is impossibly blue, a color that exists only here, only in photos that seem oversaturated until you see the reality and realize the photos were humble. The sky matches the sea, deepening as it rises, blue into blue with only a razor line of horizon between. Unpacking slowly, opening windows to let the breeze flow through. The sounds of the island enter with the air. Distant voices, the cry of seabirds, the faint clatter of construction somewhere out of sight. The soundscape is somehow peaceful despite its components. The bathroom is simple but immaculate, white tile and white towels, and a shower whose water carries the slight mineral taste of island wells. Refreshing the body after the journey, washing away the salt and the travel grime, emerging clean and ready for the evening. The balcony calls. Sitting on the small chair, wrapped in a light blanket as the afternoon cools, watching the light change on the buildings and the water. The sun descends slowly, its progress marked by the shifting colors of everything it touches. Orange gives way to pink, gives way to purple. The sea reflects the sky, reflects the buildings. The whole world becomes a watercolor, gradients of color bleeding into each other, nothing staying fixed, everything in motion. When the sun finally touches the horizon, it seems to hesitate. Its descent slows, or seems to slow, as if reluctant to leave. The final moment stretches, and then the sun is gone, leaving only color behind. The color fades slowly. The lights come on in the village. The restaurants begin to glow with warmth. The evening on the island begins. This is the first evening. There will be others. But first evenings have their own quality, their own freshness. Everything is new. Everything is possible. Welcome to the island. The morning on a Greek island begins with light. Not the tentative light of northern latitudes, but confident light, light that knows it belongs here, light that has been arriving since before memory. Waking in the white room as dawn fills the space. The sheets are crisp linen, dried in the sun and wind, carrying a freshness that no dryer could replicate. A hand rests on linen. The body absorbs the peace. Rising slowly, padding to the balcony on bare feet. The tiles are cool from the night, but warming already. The sea stretches to the horizon, still and perfect, mirroring the sky's pale blue. A few fishing boats move in the distance, too far to hear, their work already begun. Coffee appears on the terrace below, brought by the hotel owner, a woman whose family has run this place for 3 generations. The coffee is strong and sweet, made in a brickie, the grounds settling in the bottom of the small cup. Drinking it slowly, in sips, letting the caffeine arrive gradually. Breakfast follows. Greek yogurt thick as cream, local honey golden and floral, fresh fruit cut into pieces, bread still warm from the baker down the street. The food is simple because simplicity is what thrives here, what has always thrived here. After breakfast, exploring the village. The streets loop and connect in ways that seem random, but have their own logic. The logic of centuries of foot traffic, wearing paths between houses and churches and shops. Getting lost is impossible because every turn reveals something worth seeing. The churches are small, white-domed, their interiors dark and cool after the bright streets. Candles flicker before icons. The smell of incense and beeswax hangs in the still air. Lighting a candle, not quite praying but not quite not praying, letting the flame be whatever it is. The shops sell things tourists buy, postcards and ceramics and olive oil soap. Looking without buying, appreciating without acquiring. The shopkeepers are patient, having survived centuries of visitors who look and leave. Eventually, the path leads to a Caf A Tilde copyright at the edge of the village, perched over the caldera with views that explain why humans have lived here for millennia despite the volcano, despite the earthquakes, despite the pirates who once raided these shores. Ordering a fresh orange juice, squeezed from fruit grown on trees visible from this spot. The color is darker than supermarket juice, more orange in the true sense, the color the fruit would be if it could speak itself. Sitting with the juice, watching the day develop. A cruise ship enters the caldera, impossibly large, dwarfing the fishing boats that scatter from its path. The ship will disgorge tourists who have a few hours to see what takes days to understand. The afternoon brings the heat. The island slows. Shops close. The donkeys rest in their shaded stalls. Even the cats, who normally own this place, retreat to cool corners and wait for evening. Returning to the hotel for the siesta that the culture mandates. The room is cool behind its shutters. The bed receives the body. The fan turns slowly overhead. Sleep comes easily, dreamlessly, restoratively. Waking as the shadows lengthen. The heat has broken. The island is stirring again. The evening on Santorini begins. The village of Amura stands at the highest point of Santorini's caldera rim, quieter than Oya, its views equally spectacular. Walking here in the early morning, before the day trippers arrive from the cruise ships, before the tour buses disgorge their passengers at the famous sunset points. The path from Fira to Amura follows the caldera edge, a well-maintained trail with views that justify every step. The walk takes perhaps 45 minutes, passing through Fira Stefani, another cliffside village, each revealed view more striking than the last. The morning light is different from the sunset light that Santorini is famous for. It is cleaner, sharper, illuminating the eastern faces of the white buildings while leaving the caldera in gentle shadow. The cruise ships anchored in the harbor glitter like jewelry. Amura churches are particularly beautiful. Blue domes, white walls, the iconic combination reproduced on 1,000 postcards, but still moving in person. The churches are small, intimate, built when the villages were genuinely isolated from each other, and each needed its own place of worship. Entering one church that is open, its door ajar in welcome. The interior is cool and dark after the bright morning, the smell of incense and beeswax candles hanging in the still air. An icon of the Virgin watches. A candle flickers. Lighting a candle, as others have lit candles for centuries. The gesture is simple, the meaning personal and variable. For some it is prayer. For some it is remembrance. For some it is merely participation in something old and beautiful. Continuing to Scaro's Rock, the remnant of a medieval Venetian fortress that once guarded the island. The rock juts out into the caldera, its ruins barely visible, mostly eroded or reclaimed by the island itself. The climb is modest, but the views are exceptional. From Scaro's, the full sweep of Santorini is visible. The villages strung along the caldera rim like pearls on a necklace. the volcanic islands in the center, the cliffs falling away to the blue water far below. The scale is both intimate and vast. Sitting on the rock, watching the world wake up. The sounds from the port drift up faintly. A church bell marks the hour. The ferry from Piraeus rounds the northern tip of the island, beginning its approach to the harbor. This is what morning should be. Not hurried, not scheduled, simply present to whatever unfolds. The rock does not care about schedules. The view will be here, whether or not it is observed. But it is better observed. It deserves attention. The return walk takes longer because there is no reason to hurry. Stopping at a cafe in Firastefani for mid-morning coffee, sitting on the terrace, watching the sun climb higher. The caffeine arrives gently in the blood. The day opens like a flower. By midday, the villages will be crowded. The cruise ship passengers flooding the paths with cameras and complaints about the steps. But the morning belonged to those who woke early, who walked rather than bussed, who saw the island in its quiet phase. The island has two faces. The tourist face is famous. The quiet face is better. Find the quiet face. It is worth the early rising. It is worth everything. The evening walk takes a different path, downward this time, toward the old port where the fishing boats tie up and the tavernas serve the day's catch. The steps are cut into the cliff face, 300 of them, winding down switchbacks that bring the sea closer with each turn. The walk can be avoided by cable car or by donkey, but the steps are the true path, the ancient path, and walking them is part of understanding this place. The port below grows larger as the descent continues. The boats seem to multiply, more visible now, their colors more distinct. The sounds of the harbor rise to meet the descending traveler. Conversations in Greek, the clatter of dishes, the splash of water against hulls. Arriving at the bottom as the sunset begins. The restaurants line the waterfront, their tables extending onto the quay, their lights coming on as the natural light fades. Choosing one that seems welcoming, taking a table at the water's edge. The menu is in Greek with English translations that charm more than clarify. Ordering by pointing, by trusting the waiter's recommendations, by saying yes to whatever seems local. The waiter nods approval at each choice. First comes horiadiki, the village salad that Americans call Greek salad. But here it is what salad should be. Tomatoes that taste of summer, cucumbers that snap with freshness, olives that carry the flavor of the tree, feta that crumbles into salt and cream. The olive oil poured over it is green gold and fragrant. Then grilled octopus, caught this morning, its tentacles charred at the edges, tender within. The taste is of the sea itself, concentrated and clean. A squeeze of lemon, a sip of wine, the combination perfect. The wine is local, from vines grown in volcanic soil, given over to the sun and wind. It tastes of the minerals that make these islands what they are. Not a famous wine, not an exported wine, but a wine that belongs here and nowhere else. The main course is fish, chosen by going to the kitchen and pointing at what looks freshest. It arrives whole, grilled simply, laid on a plate with potatoes and vegetables. Eating it requires the fingers, pulling flesh from bone, extracting every bit of what the sea has offered. The meal takes hours. In Greece, eating is not fuel but culture. The courses arrive when they arrive. The waiter checks only occasionally. The expectation is that you will stay, that you will talk, that you will drink more wine and order more food as the night deepens. And the night does deepen. The stars emerge, one by one, then all at once, filling the sky that arcs over the harbor. The lights of other islands are visible across the water. The world beyond this moment exists, but does not press. When the meal finally ends, climbing back up those 300 steps. The climb is harder than the descent, but the body is warm with wine and satisfaction. Each step brings the village closer, its lights beckoning from above. Arriving at the top breathless and happy. The streets are quieter now, the tourists return to their hotels, the locals out in their own gathering places. Walking through emptier lanes, discovering corners that were hidden by daylight crowds. The night on Santorini is not for sleeping. It is for existing, for being here, for letting the island seep into the memory where it will live forever. But eventually, even the most persistent wanderer must rest. The White Room waits. The sea whispers below. The stars turn overhead. Sleep comes like a blessing. The winery visit on Santorini reveals something unique about the island's viticulture. These grapes grow nowhere else quite like this, shaped by volcanic soil and relentless wind into something extraordinary. The vines do not grow tall on trellises here. They are woven into low baskets, called coulera, protecting the grapes from the fierce Aegean winds. The technique has been practiced for thousands of years, perhaps since the Minoans, creating a vineyard landscape that looks more like art installation than agriculture. Arriving at the winery, as afternoon light softens the landscape. The building is a cave dug into the volcanic rock, its interior naturally cool, perfect for storing and aging wine. The aesthetic is minimalist: white walls, clean lines, glass and steel amid ancient stone. The sommelier explains the unique conditions of Santorini winemaking. The volcanic soil drains quickly, stressing the vines and concentrating flavor. The sea mist provides just enough moisture to sustain the plants. The result is wines of remarkable intensity, despite the challenging conditions. The tasting begins with Asiatico, the island's signature white grape. The acidity is sharp, almost electric, cutting through the tongue. The mineral quality is distinct, tasting of the volcanic soil where the grapes grew. This is terroir made liquid, the island in a glass. Additional varieties follow. The sweet Vinsanto, made from grapes dried in the sun, concentrated to syrup sweetness balanced by the trademark acidity. The rare Mandalaria Red, unusual on an island dominated by white wine production. Each glass tells part of the island's story. Between pours, the sommelier shares history. Wine has been made here for at least 3,500 years. The Santorini wine industry survived the Ottoman period, the phylloxera epidemic that devastated most of Europe, and the transition to tourism. The traditions persist because they work, because nothing else works as well in these specific conditions. From the winery terrace, watching the sunset over the caldera. The wine tastes better here than it could anywhere else, context elevating content, the experience completing the knowledge. Understanding the vine and the soil makes every sip meaningful. The return to the village is slow, the wine's warmth encouraging contemplation rather than haste. The streets are quiet at this hour, the restaurant rush not yet begun, the light perfect for photography or simply for looking. Dinner tonight is at a restaurant recommended by the winery. The seafood is exceptional, caught that morning, prepared simply, paired with the same wines that were tasted earlier. The combination approaches perfection. Eating on the terrace as the stars emerge. The Milky Way is visible, arcing over the caldera, connecting the ancient sky to the ancient island. The wine flows, the food satisfies, the evening extends as Greek evenings always do. This is why people come to Santorini. Not just the views, not just the sunsets, but the complete experience of a place where every element harmonizes. The wine belongs to the soil. The food belongs to the sea. The light belongs to the sky. And for this evening, the visitor belongs here too. Another glass. Another moment. Another perfect night on the island. The second day brings exploration beyond the immediate village. The island bus arrives on its own schedule, packed with locals and tourists alike, winding roads that seem carved from the volcanic rock itself. The destination is the ancient site of Akrotiri, a city buried by the same eruption that created the caldera, preserved beneath ash for 3,000 years before being rediscovered. The ruins are not like the ruins of Rome or Athens. There are no grand monuments, no temples to gods. Instead, there are houses, ordinary houses where ordinary people lived, their walls still standing, their storage jars still in place. Their secrets slowly yielded to archaeologists who work here season after season. Walking through the covered excavation, wooden walkways suspended above the ancient streets. The frescoes that once decorated these walls are in museums now, too precious to leave exposed, but reproductions show what the Minoans painted. Dolphins and monkeys and boxing children, a civilization that valued beauty and joy. The guide explains that no bodies have been found here. The people of Akrotiri apparently saw the warning signs and left before the final explosion. They took what they could carry. They did not return. What happened to them remains unknown. Standing in what was once a home, imagining the family who lived here. Their cooking pots are still arranged on shelves. Their olive oil press is still recognizable. Their lives are accessible in a way that grander ruins do not allow. After Akrotiri, the bus continues to the Red Beach, where volcanic rock has weathered to deep crimson. Swimming here is different from swimming in ordinary seas. The water is warm from thermal vents, the sand hot underfoot, the cliffs rising in colors that seem painted rather than natural. Floating in the thermal waters, looking up at the red cliffs and the blue sky. The body is weightless, suspended between earth and heaven. The mind empties of everything except sensation. This is what the Greeks understood about their islands, what they have understood for millennia. Returning to the village as afternoon heat peaks. The siesta today is taken on the beach of Parissa, where black volcanic sand absorbs the sun's warmth and transfers it to tired bodies. An umbrella provides just enough shade. A paperback provides just enough distraction. The hours pass. The waves lapse rhythmically against the shore. The beach bar plays music soft enough to ignore. The world beyond this beach might not exist. Evening brings return to Oya, the famous sunset village, joining hundreds of others who make this daily pilgrimage. The crowd is dense but not unpleasant, everyone united in purpose, everyone facing west. The sunset from Oya is famous for good reason. The sun descends between islands, creating silhouettes of volcanic shapes, casting colors that seem impossible, climaxing in a green flash that appears or does not appear depending on luck and atmospherics. Tonight the green flash appears, or seems to. The crowd applauds, as if the sun has performed for their benefit. Perhaps it has. Perhaps this is what the Greeks have always understood, that beauty responds to attention, that watching is its own form of participation. Walking back through the village as night settles. The restaurants and bars are full. Music drifts from open doorways. The night on Santorini is young, as it always is, as it always will be. Another day on the island. Another gift. Tomorrow brings more. Tonight brings rest. The caldera of Santorini is best understood from the water. Booking a small boat tour for the afternoon, joining a handful of other travelers on a wooden kayak that has been ferrying visitors for decades. The captain is weathered and silent, communicating primarily through gesture and the movement of the boat. He knows these waters intimately, having sailed them since childhood. His grandfather captained a similar boat. His son will likely do the same. Pulling away from the old port, the full scale of the caldera becomes apparent. The cliffs rise several hundred meters, layers of volcanic rock striped in reds and blacks and browns. The villages perched on top seem impossibly small, their white buildings like scattered salt against the dark stone. The boat makes for the volcanic islands at the caldera's center. These are new land, geologically speaking, pushed up by eruptions over the past 2,000 years. The most recent eruption was in 1950. The volcano is dormant, not extinct. Landing on Nikamni, the largest of the volcanic islands. The ground here is black and unstable, composed of loose volcanic rock that shifts underfoot. A path leads upward toward the summit crater, through terrain that looks like another planet. Hiking in the afternoon heat is challenging. The black rock absorbs the sun's heat and radiates it back. There is no shade, no water, no relief except the occasional sea breeze. The climb takes perhaps 30 minutes, but feels longer. At the summit, looking down into the crater, steam rises from vents in the rock. The smell of sulfur is strong. This is an active volcanic system, temporarily quiet but fundamentally dangerous. The Earth here is alive in ways that most land is not. The view from the summit encompasses the entire caldera. Santorini curves around to the north. Thurusha, a smaller inhabited island, lies to the west. The depth of the water in the caldera center is significant, several hundred meters, testament to the violence of the ancient eruption that created this formation. Around 1600 BCE, the volcano that once stood here erupted catastrophically. The explosion was one of the largest in human history. The center of the island collapsed into the sea, creating the caldera. The Minoan civilization on nearby Crete was devastated by the resulting tsunami. Some scholars believe this eruption inspired the legend of Atlantis, an advanced civilization destroyed by volcanic cataclysm, sinking into the sea. The parallel is suggestive, if not proven. Standing on the crater rim, contemplating the power that created this landscape. Humans have lived here for thousands of years, rebuilding after each eruption, accepting the risk in exchange for the beauty and the fertile volcanic soil. The descent is easier than the ascent. The boat waits at the dock, other passengers slowly returning from their own explorations. The captain offers water and fruit, simple hospitality that feels generous after the climb. The next stop is the hot springs, sulfurous waters where the sea meets volcanic vents. Swimming here turns skin orange from the minerals. The water is warm, almost hot, a strange sensation in the sea. Floating in the hot springs as the sun begins its descent. The cliffs of Santorini glow in the evening light. Other boats anchor nearby, their passengers swimming or lounging on deck. The scene is almost impossibly picturesque. Returning to the old port as dusk falls. The lights of the villages are coming on above. The climb back up, by foot or donkey or cable car, waits. But for now, floating on the warm water, everything is perfect. The volcano sleeps. The tourists swim. The beauty persists. It is a good arrangement for now. The traditional village of Piagos offers a different perspective on Santorini, away from the caldera rim that draws most tourists. This inland village was once the island's capital, its fortress providing protection from pirates that the coastal settlements could not. Walking through Piagos feels like stepping back in time. The streets are even narrower than in Oia or Fira, too narrow for any vehicle, barely wide enough for two people to pass. The buildings retain their medieval character, their walls thick enough to keep cool in summer and warm in winter. The Castelli, the fortified center, rises on a hill above the rest of the village. The houses here are built into and onto each other, creating a maze of passageways and staircases that confuses all visitors. Getting lost is inevitable. Finding the way out is part of the adventure. At the top of the Castelli, a small church and a panoramic view. From here, the entire island is visible, from the northern tip to the southern lighthouse, from the caldera to the opposite coast. The view explains why this location was chosen for defense. Nothing approaches unseen. The village square is quiet in the morning, a few cafes just opening, a few locals out for early errands. Sitting at an outdoor table, ordering Greek coffee, watching the village wake. The pace here is different from the tourist centers. Life unfolds according to its own rhythm. A small museum nearby documents the island's history, particularly the catastrophic earthquake of 1956 that destroyed many villages and forced mass emigration. The photographs of destruction are sobering. The photographs of rebuilding are inspiring. The island has survived worse than tourism. Walking back through the village, stopping at a small shop selling local products. The tomatoes grown here are famous, their flavor intensified by the volcanic soil and limited water. Cherry tomatoes, capers, fava beans, all the products of a landscape that looks barren but proves fertile. Buying gifts to bring home. Tomato paste in small jars. Capers preserved in salt. Honey from bees that feed on thyme and wildflowers. These tastes will extend the trip, each opening releasing a rush of memory. The road from Piagos winds to the ancient site of ancient Thera, high on a mountain ridge between two bays. The ruins here span centuries, from the Dorian Greeks through Roman occupation, layers of settlement visible in the remaining walls and streets. The view from ancient Thera is spectacular, perhaps the best on the island. The caldera is visible to the west. The Aegean stretches east toward Turkey. The sense of being between worlds, between sea and sea, is palpable. Walking among the ruins, imagining the lives that were lived here. The marketplace where goods were traded. The theater where performances entertained. The temples where gods were honored. The gymnasium where young men trained. A complete civilization, now reduced to stones. The archaeological imagination is a form of time travel. Standing where ancient Greeks stood, looking at views they saw, touching stones they touched. The connection across millennia is tenuous but real. The afternoon brings the return to the tourist centers, the transition from ancient to modern, from contemplation to commerce. But the morning's quiet remains, a counterweight to the evening's bustle. Santorini is more than its famous views. It is also this: villages clinging to hilltops, ruins speaking of vanished lives, products of volcanic soil. See all of it if you can. The island rewards exploration. The island has depth as well as surface. Dig down. You will find treasure. The third day brings a ferry to Naxos, the lesser-known sister island, larger and greener, less dramatic but more authentic in certain ways. The ferry crossing takes less than 2 hours. Standing on the deck watching Santorini recede, its white villages shrinking against the dark volcanic rock. Ahead, Naxos rises differently. Gently, its mountains green with vegetation that Santorini cannot support. Arriving at the port town of Naxos Kora, dominated by the Portura, the great stone doorway that is all that remains of an unfinished temple to Apollo. Walking through the door, framing the town in its ancient archway, connecting across millennia to those who placed these stones. The hotel on Naxos is simpler than on Santorini, a family guest house where the owner's grandmother still makes breakfast. The room looks over an olive grove whose trees have been producing fruit for centuries. The sound of cicadas fills the afternoon air. Renting a small car to explore the island, roads that wind through villages where tourism has barely touched. The villages have bakeries and butchers and kafnea, where old men play backgammon and younger men watch football on screens that seem incongruous in such ancient settings. The village of Chalky is particularly beautiful, its central square shaded by a plane tree said to be 700 years old. Buying citron liqueur from a shop that has produced it for generations, the taste intense and sweet and bitter all at once. The inland villages of Naxos are built of marble, for marble is what the island has. The quarries that once supplied temples across the ancient world still operate, though now for countertops rather than columns. The stone is everywhere, in walls and wells and the grinding stones of olive presses. Driving higher into the mountains, where Mount Zas looms over everything. Greek mythology claims this as the birthplace of Zeus, the king of gods. The cave where he was supposedly hidden as an infant is accessible by a hiking trail that climbs through scrub and rock. The hike takes an hour, the trail rough but well-marked. The reward is a cave opening that does not impress architecturally, but impresses psychologically. Standing where ancient Greeks believed divinity entered the world, feeling the weight of belief that has accumulated here over millennia. Descending as the afternoon light softens. The The views from the mountain encompass the entire island and the sea beyond. Other islands are visible in every direction, scattered across the Aegean like stepping stones for giants or gods. Dinner is in a mountain village, at a taverna that serves only what was grown or raised within walking distance. The lamb comes from sheep that graze the hills behind the building. The vegetables come from the garden visible through the window. The wine comes from grapes that grow on vines older than the nation of Greece. The meal is simple but profound, each element connected to place in ways that restaurant food rarely achieves. The taste is authenticity, is terroir, is centuries of knowledge concentrated on a plate. Driving back to the hotel as stars emerge. The roads are dark, lit only by headlights and the occasional village. The island feels infinite in the darkness, its edges undefined, its possibilities unlimited. Tomorrow will bring more exploration. Tonight brings gratitude. Naxos has revealed itself. The islands continue. The beach day on Naxos takes a different character from the beach day on Santorini. Where Santorini's beaches are volcanic, dark, and dramatic, Naxos offers sand beaches that stretch for miles, their color ranging from golden to white. The island is larger, less crowded, more authentically Greek in some ways. Tourism is important here, but not dominant. The economy still includes agriculture, fishing, marble quarrying. The visitors are part of the mix, not the whole of it. Renting a small boat for the day, a simple affair with an outboard motor and a sunshade. The rental agent explains the basics, points toward beaches accessible only by water, and hands over the key. No further supervision is needed or offered. Piloting out of the harbor, past fishing boats returning from the morning's work, past the portera that has guarded this entrance for millennia. The sea is calm, the sky cloudless, the day perfect for aimless exploration. The first cove is empty despite its beauty. A crescent of sand backed by olive trees, water clear to the sandy bottom 5 meters down. Anchoring the boat, swimming to shore, walking the beach end to end without seeing another soul. This solitude is precious. Santorini rarely offers it, its beauty too famous, too accessible. Here, a few kilometers from the port, everything is quiet. The only sounds are waves, birds, the distant hum of a tractor somewhere inland. Lunch is the food brought from town: bread, cheese, tomatoes, olives. A bottle of water, warming in the sun. The simplicity matches the setting. Nothing is needed but what is present. The afternoon brings exploration of other coves, other beaches, each slightly different, each equally empty. The fuel gauge declines slowly. The sun moves across the sky. The day extends without urgency. Late afternoon finds a cove with a small taverna, accessible only by boat or a long footpath. The few customers are all sailors, all arriving by water, all greeted by a proprietor who seems genuinely pleased to have company. The menu is whatever was caught that morning. Fish grilled simply, served with salad and bread. The wine is local, served in tumblers, rough but friendly. The conversation with neighboring tables is easy, facilitated by the shared experience of finding this hidden place. Watching the sunset from the taverna deck. The island of Paros is visible in the distance, gilded by evening light. The boats anchored in the cove rock gently. The fishermen prepare to depart for night work. Returning to the port as darkness settles, navigating by the lights of the town, by the portara illuminated against the black sky. The rental agent accepts the boat back with a nod, the transaction complete. Walking through the evening streets, the energy of the town different from before departure. Music spills from bars. Families promenade along the waterfront. The day's adventures are stories to be told over dinner. This is the other Greece, the one that tourists sometimes miss. Not the famous sights, not the crowded viewpoints, but the empty coves, the hidden tavernas, the days without plans. It is worth seeking. It is worth the effort. The islands reward those who explore. The fourth day on Naxos brings the beach that makes this island famous among those who know. Plaka Beach stretches for kilometers, sand so fine it squeaks underfoot, water so clear that fish are visible from the shore. Driving to the beach early, before the day trippers arrive. Setting up in a spot that will remain relatively private throughout the day. The umbrella is unnecessary at this hour, but will be essential later. Swimming in the morning Aegean. The water is cool but not cold, invigorating rather than shocking. The salt buoys the body, making swimming effortless. Floating on the back, looking up at the perfectly cloudless sky, counting time in breaths rather than minutes. Emerging from the water renewed. The body dries in minutes in the Greek air, the salt crystallizing on skin, a reminder that this water is ancient, has been evaporating and refilling for millions of years. Building a small sand structure, not quite a castle, more an abstract sculpture. The activity is purposeless in the best way, engaging the hands while freeing the mind. The sculpture will be gone by tomorrow, erased by tide and wind and the feet of other visitors. Lunch comes from a beach shack that has occupied this spot for decades. The gyros is perfect. Meat sliced fresh from the spinning spit, wrapped in pita with tzatziki and tomatoes and onions. The combination of the food and the location creates a memory that will last. The afternoon heat is intense. Moving under the umbrella, reading, dozing, watching the sea. Families arrive and depart. Children build and destroy. Young couples walk hand in hand along the waterline. The beach is a theater of human life, its performance gentle and unending. Swimming again as the afternoon cools. This time going further, past the gentle waves into the deeper water, where the current is just perceptible. Treading water, looking back at the beach, at the island, at the life that continues there. The return swim is easy, the body carried by small waves. Emerging again, salt-encrusted again, tired in the good way that physical exertion creates, ready for the evening that approaches. Driving to a different village for dinner, one recommended by the hotel owner. The village has no tourists, only locals who gather in the evening square to discuss the day, to monitor their children, to exist in community. The taverna's owner speaks no English. Ordering is an adventure, in pantomime and goodwill. What arrives is not what was expected, but is exactly what was needed. Stewed goat with potatoes, bread for soaking up the sauce, wine from the barrel. Eating among Greeks who pay no attention to the strange visitor, absorbed in their own conversations, their own lives, their own particular version of this eternal island rhythm. Driving back under stars so thick they seem to have substance. Stopping by the roadside to look up, away from any lights, seeing the Milky Way as the ancients saw it, as a pathway across the sky. The Greeks called it Galaxias Kyklos, the Milky Circle. All of astronomy begins here, with shepherds and sailors looking up, naming what they saw, finding meaning in the patterns. Looking up now, joining that ancient tradition. The stars do not care. The stars are beautiful anyway. The night is huge. The islands are small. Both are necessary. Sleep will come when it comes. For now, the stars are enough. The ferry back from Naxos to Santorini offers a last immersion in the island-hopping rhythm before the airport return. The crossing takes a few hours, time enough to process what has been experienced, to begin the mental transition from vacation to ordinary life. Finding a spot on the upper deck, sheltered from the wind but open to the view. The sea passes beneath, blue turning to darker blue as the depths increase between islands. Paros appears to starboard, its windmills visible on the heights, another island not explored, another possibility for another trip. The Greek islands number in the thousands. Most are uninhabited, mere rocks rising from the sea. But hundreds support communities, each with its own character, its own traditions, its own claim on the visitor's attention. A lifetime would not exhaust them. This is both frustrating and beautiful. Frustrating because there is always more, always another island calling. Beautiful because the adventure never ends, because return is always possible, because the map is never fully explored. The ferry makes an intermediate stop at Ios, the party island, famous for its nightlife, its young tourists, its very different energy from the places just visited. Even from the ferry dock, the vibe is apparent. Perhaps next time. Perhaps not. The islands offer choice. Approaching Santorini from the water is different from approaching by air. The caldera reveals itself gradually, the cliffs growing higher, the villages becoming visible on their perches, the scale becoming apparent. By the time the ferry docks at Athenios, Santorini has been understood in a new way. From the port, the bus climbs the serpentine road to Fiera. Each switchback offers new perspectives on the caldera, the volcanic islands, the sea that fills what was once land. The ascent is a meditation on geological time, on the forces that created this landscape. Back in Fiera for the final night. The hotel room is familiar now, its view no longer astonishing but comforting. Unpacking the small bag, showering off the salt from the ferry crossing, preparing for one last evening on the caldera rim. Dinner is at a restaurant visited on the first night, returning to where the journey began. The waiter remembers or seems to remember, and the welcome is warm. The same dish that introduced Santorini will conclude the visit. The symmetry is satisfying. After dinner, the sunset walk to the edge of town. The crowds have gathered as they gather every night, the ritual as predictable as the sun itself. But familiarity does not diminish the spectacle. The sun sets, the colors flood the sky, the applause rises. The last sunset. Not really the last, because return is always possible, but the last of this trip, the last with this particular intensity of first encounter mixed with familiarity. The moment is both ending and beginning. Tomorrow the ferry leaves for Piraeus. The plane waits at the Athens airport. The ordinary world, always patient, always present, will reclaim its prodigal. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight the stars keep their watch. Tonight the caldera glows with the lights of 100 restaurants. Tonight the islands hold their mystery. The morning will come when it comes. For now, the night is enough. It is always enough. The final full day on the islands brings decisions about how to spend remaining time. The choice falls on simplicity. No more temples, no more villages, just the rhythm of island life absorbed as fully as possible. The morning is spent at the hotel, breakfast extending into conversation with the owner about the island's history, its changes over the decades, its uncertain future in a Greece that struggles economically while its islands boom with tourism. She remembers when the village had no cars, when the only connection to the world was the weekly ferry, when tourists were rare visitors rather than the economic foundation. She is not nostalgic exactly, but she notes what has been lost alongside what has been gained. Walking through the olive grove that surrounds the hotel. The trees are ancient, their trunks twisted into shapes that seem impossible, their branches still producing the fruit that has sustained Mediterranean civilization for millennia. Standing among them feels like standing among elders, beings that have seen more than humans can comprehend. The afternoon brings a final swim, at a small cove accessible only by a path that the hotel owner drew on a napkin. The cove is empty, its waters protected from any current, its rock walls reflecting the sunlight. Swimming here is like swimming in a private pool, except this pool is the Aegean Sea, and the walls are volcanic rock, and the privacy is the gift of knowing where to look. Floating in the cove, looking up at the sky, feeling the salt water support the body, the sun warm the face. The mind empties entirely. There is nothing to think about, nothing to remember, nothing to plan. There is only this moment, this water, this light. Time passes without measurement. The shadows shift. The afternoon lengthens. Eventually, hunger suggests that the floating should end, that the return to the world should begin. Walking back to the hotel, the path now familiar, its rocks and turns known to the body. Showering off the salt, the water from the tank sun-warmed, the soap glycerin that dissolves in the sea water's mineral. The final dinner is at the hotel, a private meal prepared by the grandmother who has fed guests here for 50 years. She will not say what she is cooking. When it arrives, it is perfect. Dishes that have never been written down, techniques passed from mother to daughter, flavors that exist nowhere else. The meal ends with homemade liqueur and preserved fruit. The grandmother sits briefly at the table, accepting compliments she does not need but still enjoys, sharing a moment of connection across language and age and culture. The night is spent on the terrace, looking up at stars that have returned as they always return, reliable as the tide, indifferent as the sea. Tomorrow brings departure. Tonight brings completion. The islands have given everything they have. The islands are complete. The village dinner on the last night in Naxos becomes a farewell not just to Naxos, but to the entire Greek island experience. The restaurant is in a small square, tables set beneath a giant plane tree, local families mixing with travelers. The grandmother who runs the kitchen comes out periodically to check on tables. Her English is limited, but her hospitality is fluent. She recommends dishes with gestures, approves wine choices with nods, beams when plates come back empty. The meal begins with mezeds, the small dishes that define Greek dining. Tzatziki sharp with garlic. Melatsanizalata smoky from roasted eggplant. Taramazalata pink and briny. Fava, the split pea puree that is a specialty of these islands, smooth and just slightly sweet. The bread is thick-crusted, baked that day, perfect for sopping up the oils and per a tilde copyright ease. The wine is the local variety, unnamed beyond white or red, served in ceramic carafes that sweat with condensation. The main course is lamb, roasted slowly until the meat falls from the bone. The fat has rendered out, the exterior crisp, the interior meltingly tender. Potatoes roasted in the same pan have absorbed the lamb's juices. The combination is simple and perfect. Eating slowly, as Greeks eat, as the islands teach you to eat. Course follows course with gaps for conversation, for watching the square, for ordering another carafe of wine. The meal is not fuel but event. The grandmother brings dessert unbidden. Preserved fruits in syrup, intensely sweet, served with thick yogurt to cut the sugar. Then Greek coffee made in the bricky, sipped slowly as the grounds settle. The bill, when it comes, is absurdly small. The value received so dramatically exceeds the money paid that something like guilt arises. But the grandmother waves off excessive tips with genuine seeming annoyance. This is the price. That is the food. The joy of feeding people is its own reward. Walking back to the hotel through the dark streets. The town is quiet, the tourists gone to their accommodations, the locals retreating to their homes. A cat crosses the path and disappears into shadows. A television flickers behind a curtained window. The harbor is still, the fishing boats dark, their work for this day complete. Tomorrow's work will begin before dawn, as it has begun for countless mornings, as it will begin for countless more. The rhythm of island life persists regardless of visitors. Standing at the water's edge, looking out at the dark Aegean. The stars overhead are bright, Orion rising in the east, the Pleiades following. These same stars guided ancient Greek sailors. They guide seafarers still. The islands have been inhabited for at least 5,000 years. Civilizations have risen and fallen. Invaders have come and gone. The landscape itself has changed, volcanoes exploding, coastlines shifting. Through it all, people have lived here, fishing and farming and building the villages that visitors now explore. Being part of this continuity, even briefly, is a privilege. The tourist is not separate from the island's history, but woven into it, another thread in a tapestry still being made. Tomorrow brings departure. Tonight brings gratitude. For the islands, for the people, for the light and the sea and the wine. For everything. Evcharisto. Thank you. Until the next time. The night before departure, walking through Fira one last time. The streets that seemed confusing on arrival are now navigable by intuition. The shops that seemed interchangeable now have personalities. The restaurants have memories attached. This is what happens when we stay somewhere long enough. The strange becomes familiar. The foreign becomes home. The place we visit becomes a place we have lived, if only briefly. The jewelry shops glow with light, their gold and silver catching the evening illumination. The clothing boutiques display linen and cotton in the white-on-white aesthetic that defines island fashion. The art galleries show paintings of views that can be seen for free from any terrace. Stopping for a final drink at a bar perched on the caldera edge. The cocktail is expensive, the view is free, the combination is appropriate for a farewell. The bartender is skilled, creating something with local ingredients, with citrus and herbs and the island's distinctive character. Sipping slowly, watching the lights of the villages reflect from the still water of the caldera. The cruise ships have departed, their bulk no longer dominating the view. The ferries are moored for the night. The caldera belongs to the islands now, as it has belonged to them for millennia. Thinking about what has been experienced and what remains to be understood. The islands gave their beauty freely, but their meaning requires time to unfold. The memories will surface unexpectedly in future months, triggered by a taste or a scent or a quality of light. This is the value of travel. Not just the experiences themselves, but their echoes, their ability to enrich ordinary life with extraordinary memory. The morning coffee will taste different because Greek coffee exists. The sunset will matter more because Santorini sunsets exist. The walk back to the hotel is slow, deliberately slow, savoring the final steps through streets that may not be walked again for years. Every storefront, every church dome, every glimpse of the caldera is registered and stored. The hotel room is cool and welcoming. The bed is made with the same precision as on arrival. But everything feels different now. The room has become a place of rest rather than just a room. Packing for the morning departure. The clothes worn on the islands go into the bag, carrying their memories with them. The souvenirs find their protected places. The guidebook that was consulted constantly is now superfluous. The knowledge it contained has been embodied. Setting the alarm for early departure. Not too early, the flight is midday, the logistics manageable. But early enough for a final walk, a final coffee, a final look at the light that makes these islands famous. Sleep comes easily, the body tired from days of walking and swimming and exploring. The dreams are of water and light, of white buildings against dark cliffs, of tastes and sounds and sensations that have become part of the inner landscape. Tomorrow the journey home begins. But home is a flexible concept now. Part of home is here, on these islands in the caldera, among the olive trees and the grapevines and the warm sea. We carry places with us. The islands are part of us now. This is the gift,